Okay, so imagine a city that hasn't just been defeated, it's been completely erased. That's Berlin, 1945. What happens after the bombs finally stop falling? But the fight for your own survival, has only just begun. Today, we're diving deep into the chaotic, unbelievably dangerous, and surprisingly vibrant world of a city literally rebuilding itself from zero. Let's get into it.
Right, so you need to forget those black and white pictures of quiet, somber ruins. That is not what it was like. The reality of Berlin in '45, it was a loud, chaotic symphony of pure chaos. I mean, think of it like a pressure cooker packed with Soviet soldiers celebrating, shell-shocked Germans, refugees pouring in from the east, and all kinds of opportunists, all just clawing for a foothold in the rubble. So, let's talk about where this new world even begins. The moment the war officially ended, the Germans called it Stunde Null, the 0 hour. But for the people in Berlin, this wasn't really an end. It was more like the starting pistol for a brand new and frankly brutal kind of struggle.
The sheer scale of this human tide, was just staggering. Picture this. You have Red Army soldiers who've just conquered the city. Right behind them come the Western Allies. You've got displaced people trudging west because their homes are just gone. You have Berliners coming back to the city only to find skeletons of buildings. And then you have all these former forced laborers suddenly free, but with absolutely nowhere to go. In this insane, desperate mix, nobody knew what tomorrow held. Nobody knew where their next meal was coming from. To really get the trauma here, you have to try and feel it. An eyewitness, Louisa Lunor, was just 13 years old, and her memory, it's not about statistics or dates. It's the visceral, physical feeling of the world violently shaking apart all around her. That's a kind of terror that settles deep in your bones, long after the bombs have gone silent. So how do you even survive in a world with no rules? I mean, with society totally shattered, a new, much more primal code just took over. The only real law was figuring out how to make it to the next sunrise. And this was the first attempt by the new Allied military government to bring in some order. A clear, brutal warning plastered absolutely everywhere. The message was simple: the chaos ends now. Yeah, but for the average Berliner, that order, it was basically a death sentence. As one survivor put it, pretty bluntly, the choice was simple: either starve to death or be shot. Seriously, put yourself in their shoes for a second. What do? All of a sudden, looting isn't about greed. It's about feeding your family. It's pure survival. So just how criminal did you have to become to survive? Well, one newspaper actually did the math. They calculated that for all the illegal stuff a typical family of four had to do, bartering, using fake ration cards, stealing firewood, they could face a collective 12 years in prison. Think about that. In post-war Berlin, being a law-abiding citizen literally meant starving. This desperation gave birth to a whole new social hub, the black market. It was actually nicknamed a citizenship school because it taught you the new rules of survival. Mistrust everyone, learn how to haggle, and understand that your family's silver spoon is worthless when what you really need is a loaf of bread. A bundle of counterfeit ration cards? That became a popular birthday gift. It was like the Amazon voucher of 1945. But this brutal new world, this daily fight for survival, it hit one group harder than anyone else: the kids. An entire generation of young people had their whole world, everything they believed in, their entire future, just utterly obliterated. I mean, think about it. These were kids raised to believe in a 1,000-year empire, and a leader who was basically a god. They were told they were the future. And then, overnight, poof, it's all gone. Their ideology, their homes, often their parents. They were just completely adrift, desperately searching for a new family, a new purpose, a new reason to even exist. And into that vacuum, a lot of them found a new home and a new source of power on the lawless streets. See, these gangs weren't just about crime. They were a replacement for the families and the structures that had just disappeared. They were a way to survive in this new urban wilderness. And the most famous of these new street families was led by this really charismatic teenager named Werner Glotto. His crew, they were known as the White Tie Gang, and they became infamous for these brazen robberies. But to the other desperate kids on the street, they were heroes. They were the ones who took what they needed to get by in a world full of victims. But while Glotto and his gang were busy carving out their own little territory in the rubble, much, much larger forces were carving up the entire city.
Berlin itself was about to be torn right in two. So the victorious Allies divided the city into 4 sectors. But the real break, that came in 1948. The Western powers brought in a new currency, the Deutschmark, and the Soviet side as an act of economic war. So what did they do? They blockaded West Berlin, completely cutting it off from the world. The response was the legendary Berlin airlift. And just like that, the Cold War had officially frozen the heart of the city. And this division created 2 parallel universes inside of one city. West Berlin, fueled by Western money, it becomes this glittering island of capitalism. Shop windows are overflowing, the streets are glamorous. It was a place of longing. And East Berlin, under Soviet control, well, as one resident called it, they became the poor relatives. It was a world of scarcity, constant police checkpoints, and this suffocating gray. Now, this new division, it created a massive, massive loophole. At first, the borders between the sectors were nothing more than chalk lines drawn on the pavement. So for gangs like Werner Glotto's, this was a golden opportunity. You could commit a crime in one sector and then literally just step over a line into another to escape the police. And this sets the stage for the final showdown on the streets of Berlin. You have this new, totally under-equipped police force trying to impose some kind of order on these ruthless, well-armed gangs who knew the city's new rules way better than anyone. The gangs had every single advantage. The ruins of Berlin, that was their personal armory, just littered with abandoned military weapons. They were organized, they were violent, and they used the city's brand new political geography like it was a chessboard, outmaneuvering the law at every single turn. And what did the police have to go up against? Machine guns and pistols? A single truncheon. That's it, a wooden club that the officers mockingly called a chair leg. These were just former civilians. And honestly, they were often more motivated by the promise of extra food than any sense of duty. They were hopelessly outgunned. But then the story takes a much darker turn. See, Werner Glotto wasn't content with just scams anymore. His gang escalated. They started ambushing police officers just to steal their guns. And the public, who once had this kind of grudging, almost romantic admiration for them, started to turn. And then the gang murdered a taxi driver. This wasn't a game anymore. It was deadly serious. The end came in a blaze of glory. After being cornered, Glotto got into an hour-long shootout with the police before he was finally captured. And now, the very division of the city that had been his personal playground, that would become his doom. He was tried in the Soviet sector. Now, while West Germany had just abolished the death penalty, East Germany hadn't. To make an example of him, Werner Glotto, age 19, was sentenced to death and executed. This quote, I think, just perfectly captures the paradox of that time. For every single horror, there was this almost frantic joy for life. For every trauma, there was a desperate hunger for closeness, for fun, for a new beginning. It was a time of unbelievable fear and suffering, but also of intense, wild, and unforgettable life. And so, we're left with this question. Werner Glotto was a murderer, absolutely. But he was also a product of a world where the lines between right and wrong had been completely erased by war. When society forces you to become a criminal just to eat, how do you even begin to define what justice is? It's a question that haunted Berlin, and honestly, in many ways, it still haunts us today. Thank you for joining us on The Explainer.